Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Create VR tutorial series, where you learn by watching other VR, AR, and MR professionals create the magic. I'm Marcelo Lewin, an immersive technologies evangelist, creator, producer, and the guy behind howtocreatevr.com. My guest creator today is Alejandro Dinsmore, the CEO of EEVO, a solution that helps create, distribute, and analyze VR experiences. Alejandro will give us an overview of the EEVO app and how we can use it to create VR experiences quickly. Before we get started, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and please remember to subscribe to my channel. It will only take you a second, but the more subscribers I have, the easier it'll be for me to get guests. All right, Alejandro, welcome to the tutorial series.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, welcome to the tutorial series. You're going to be showing us today the EEVO app, but before we get into that, why don't you give us a little bit background about you, how you got into VR and all that kind of stuff.
Really, this kind of started out with a bunch of people who had a shared passion for VR in college. It was really a couple of people kind of tinkering away in their dorm rooms. We were building prototypes. We did a lot of stuff with web VR, building kind of like a YouTuber VR type platform. But then what we were sort of really realized was the need for tools to make this content more accessible, because really to make VR flourish, to get it adopted, content was going to be critical. And that's kind of where we saw the major opportunity, was to build a set of tools that made it easier for content creators to really be able to create content, but also distribute it in a scalable way. You know, VR is not going to be able to have an impact if it can't actually be scaled to thousands of users. And that's especially relevant on the sort of business and enterprise side, making sure that VR can be implemented in a sort of seamless, scalable way.
So how did you get into VR itself as a user, and what's your favorite VR experience today?
I got interested in VR because I was a neuroscience student at Vassar, and I kind of came across a lot of the research. I mean, VR has been used as a tool for neuroscience research for 20, 30 years now. So I was just very sort of like, from an academic standpoint, I just became very interested in what basically the potential of VR, what's so powerful about it and immediately intriguing is that, like, physiologically, the way our brains respond in a VR environment is different than anything that happens, you know, if you're watching something on a 2D screen. So just that fact alone makes it a super compelling tool for research. And this is, you know, this is documented. This is very well documented that just like biologically, physiologically, we react differently in VR, which is very interesting. And it's a lot closer to the way that we react in real life. My first VR experience, or kind of what got me into it, was this super pixelated, very low late, like very high sort of stuttery bungee jumping experience. You're like, it was literally like this blocky kind of avatar. You walk up to the edge of this, I think it was like a tall dam or something, and you look over the edge and it kind of just pushes you off, and it made you nauseous. It was terrible, but what was so sort of immediately impactful was when I was up looking down, I got this sense of vertigo. There was this physiological, biological reaction in my body because of this virtual experience. And that was like the moment where it sort of clicked for me and became a technology that I was super interested in.
Yeah, that this stuff is for real.
Yeah, like having my body in that moment tense up, and I get pretty bad vertigo in real life, but I've never gotten it while playing video games or watching TV or anything like that. So having my body tense up like that and recognize that feeling of vertigo was just such a, you know, that to me was the strongest proof to the potential and power of VR that I could have gotten.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, you're going to show us EEVO and how it works, and you're going to be creating an experience. So why don't we jump in, and if I have questions, I'll ask.
Yeah, sounds good. So to get started, I just want to kind of break down the main components of the platform. So there's several main components of the platform, and they help you manage different projects across an organization or for different clients. They make it easy to create new interactive content. It allows you to preview and publish content to a variety of VR devices and platforms, and it allows you to measure the results of that content with a pretty in-depth analytics dashboard and very powerful tools like heat maps, which let you see how people are interacting with the content and what they're looking at. So for this tutorial and overview, I wanted to go through the process of building an employee onboarding experience using several 360 videos. So let me jump into what is sort of the central hub for managing your different experiences. So this is a starting point for organizations to manage and create new content. You can easily add a new narrative, and then if you want to add new people, you can actually click into this people section so that you can add new people from your team, and you can actually give them different permissions to edit the content. So if I wanted to add, you know, you, Marcelo, and give you access to the content that we're working on, I can just type your name in here, fill in your email, and then also set sort of the privileges that you would have. Can you publish stuff? Can you edit stuff? Or can you just, like, you know, preview the stuff that's on there? So before diving into the details, I wanted to actually preview and show you what the final experience we're going to be building will look like. So This experience is an example of how companies are using VR to innovate in ways which impact the bottom line. So in this case, Kaltura put together a proof of concept which they could show to new employees during the first week or show at recruiting events. And the goal of this experience is to help give newer prospective hires a sense of what it's actually like to work at Kaltura. So I'm going to click play here and we can get it started. So it starts with a brief intro. This is just Gil. He's kind of a VR evangelist at Kaltura, and he's kind of giving you an intro to the company. And you can't hear the volume, but he's kind of talking about high level, the company itself. And then in a few seconds here, we're going to get a couple of options of sort of different directions and paths that we can explore. So we can look around here. There's a couple of panels that pop up. And then we can sort of pick the area that we're most interested in learning more about. So let's check out, let's learn more about the Kaltura's customers. So we dived into the customer section, and this is Gil talking about, how Times Square is one of the biggest media hubs in the world, and a lot of Kaltura's customers are based here in Times Square. So here, this is just an example of how this is the type of experience you could show to a new employee to immediately kind of get them up to speed on the company in a lot more engaging and an immersive way than if it was just, a 2D video or someone kind of giving a presentation. So now we can dive back into the composer to see how you could build an experience like this, and we'll walk through that process. So here we have a nice, clean, new composer session. To make this quicker, I've already uploaded all the necessary assets. But if we needed to add any new assets, we could click down here and upload the new assets just by clicking on this plus button. But we don't need to do that right now. And if you were starting from scratch, you would just drag the asset onto the composer canvas. But I've already gone ahead and done some of the work ahead of time, so we don't have to do that. But just to give you an example, you can just drag an asset onto the composer to create a node.
Quick question regarding the assets. Your 360 videos, what's the resolution limit? Is it 4K or can you go above 4K?
Basically, we suggest uploading the highest res version that you have, and we actually do encoding for the different platforms and devices based on the resolution caps for those platforms. So we'll deliver the highest resolution format possible for each of the different platforms.
So we can future-proof it by shooting, let's say, 8K, but then for the Oculus Go, you will only stream 4K.
Yeah, exactly. And so we automatically will create different renditions based on the platform that it's being published to.
Perfect. Thank you.
So to add a hotspot, I can right-click on this timeline bar and create an exit flag. Basically, an exit flag will trigger a new action, and that action can be triggered by time or via a gaze-based hotspot. So I've already added some hotspots here. We can jump into the preview editor to see how we can easily place and move around these hotspots. So as you can see here in the preview editor, these are the different hotspots. And as far as moving them around, it's as easy as clicking and dragging. You can also manually edit the XYZ coordinates. And every time you create an exit flag, you can either link it to a hotspot so that it can trigger a new scene when a viewer looks at a hotspot, or you can have it associated with time. And you can also control the start time of these hotspots. So in this scenario, these hotspots aren't showing up until about 20 seconds in, which is when these panels show up in the experience as I kind of showed you guys earlier.
Question about hotspots. Can you place them closer to the user or farther from the user? In other words, control the Z of the hotspot itself?
Yep. So the Z here, you can, again, just control it manually by typing in the number, but you can also, one of these is a Z axis. Let's see, I believe it's the red one here.
Right. I see. And we can place that, let's say, against, where you have Kaltura there. We could place it against there and make Kaltura hot. Or the icon above it.
So I can show you here.
Right.
I can just place that. And so you can control the X, Y, and Z position, but you can also control the dimensions. So say we wanted to make this hotspot, a lot bigger. You could make it taller.
Got it.
You can make it wider. So we want to make that as easy as possible. And most people can pretty intuitively add those hotspots wherever they want in the scene. So the preview editor is definitely kind of a pretty powerful tool that we're excited about.
It's a hotspot transparent?
Yes, so there's a couple different hotspot options, and I can actually dive into those here. So we can go to the advanced options. So basically, you can have the hotspot be transparent without any sort of visual cue, but if you look down here, there's actually a box to add a visual cue. Basically, that will show a loading indicator so that when someone looks at a hotspot, it'll trigger a loading animation, and then when that loading animation completes, it will trigger that next scene seamlessly. And you can also control the time of that loading animation. So if you want that loading animation to last 5 seconds, you can just change it to 5. If you want it to be a pretty quick transition, you can change it to 1. If you don't have the visual cue selected, then it'll just be there won't be anything that shows up when the person actually looks at the hotspot. But in this case, in the video itself, there's actually these little sort of visuals that correspond with where the hotspot's supposed to be, so that a user kind of knows where to look in the video.
Okay. And then, so you don't have hotspots that automatically put in like an arrow or anything. Basically, your hotspots are transparent, and then you put in whatever image you want that hotspot to be.
Yeah, and we're playing around with adding sort of easier tools for like adding a visual hotspot or uploading an image that you want to use as the hotspot.
Right.
Honestly, the biggest thing that we found, especially working with sort of enterprise clients or companies like the BBC, is that it ends up looking better if you add that stuff in using like Premiere, Adobe Premiere, just because you have more control over the depth and you don't get weird sort of effects of like rendering an image on top of a video without knowing where the relative depths of different things will be. So typically we've found the best results combining Adobe Premiere in our tool set, and so we encourage that as kind of a great combination.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good.
Great. So we can go back into here.
One last question on hotspots.
Sure.
You have the ability to gaze over it and then it triggers, right? Do you have the ability to add like a gaze over and gaze out action that triggers something else as opposed to a gaze hold until it clicks, basically? Do you know what I mean?
As in like you look at it.
So if I just look at it, gazing in, right, gaze over it, it triggers an action. And then if I gaze out, it may be able to trigger another one. But if I hold it, then that's a third interaction that once it does the charge time, it goes to the next scene or whatever.
Yeah, at the moment it's just the
charge.
hold and trigger.
Yeah.
What you could do is, if you decide to not have that visual cue, you can have it basically be like an instant. You can have it trigger the transition instantly. So as soon as they look at that hotspot, without a loading cue, it can just jump to a different scene. But you can actually do that with audio, which I'll show you in a second. But with like a visual hotspot or triggering the video, it's just if the person is looking at the hotspot.
Yeah, it's like a click function, basically. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Exactly. So let's actually dive in and show you what it's like to connect one of these hotspots to a scene that you want to trigger next. So I'm going to add this customer segment, which is what we saw again in that demo that I showed everyone in the beginning, that we're going to go to that scene in Times Square where Gil is talking about the various customers. So let's make sure we find the right hotspot for that. I'm going to jump back into here. Let's look at, this is exit flag 2, which is associated with the customers. So let's find exit flag 2 here. And then we have to connect it to node 13. So I'm going to, in this next node menu, I just click the node that I want it to connect to. And I can also click and just connect it on via the composer. But when you have a lot of things going on at once, it's a little bit easier to just use this menu. So let's do node 13. We'll click save. And now you see that this node is connected. So when the person looks at that exit flag, it'll now trigger this scene here, which I've added.
Question about the names. You have no 13, exit flag 3. Can you rename those to say go outside and then rename no 13 to outside view or whatever?
Yeah. So here you can actually, you could change this exit flag to customers. And then you would be able to organize things a bit better there. And then also with the nodes, you can also, you can change the node name. So if we wanted to make this one customers, just to make everything a little bit more clear, now that node is customers. And then when you go here, it'll show up as customers.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's better. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I wanted to quickly show is here in this video, since it's it works as kind of a central hub node where the user can then navigate to different parts of the experience, but we don't want the experience to end when the person reaches the end of this video. So what you can do is you can actually create an exit flag that gets triggered at the end of the video, and then you can have that video basically loop in on itself. And the way that you do that is you go back to this next node, and then you select the node itself. so that basically at time 48, which is when that video ends, it'll just start the video over again. So that way you'll have that video just continually loop.
Can you pick where in the loop you want it to start at, or does it start from?
Yeah. So here you have start time in next node, which is just going to be the same video. So I have it set at 30 so that it skips that whole intro section and basically just loops the part where Gil is kind of standing, waiting for you to make a choice. So yeah, you can, by choosing the start time in next node, that allows you to skip parts that you don't want him to repeat the intro every single time.
Right, exactly.
So this is just kind of a simple experience. We don't have to build out all the different options. This should give you a basic understanding of how the different hotspots work. The one other thing that I can quickly jump into here is how to add things like audio. Say we wanted to add some, a music background to the intro section. The functionality works very similar to the video assets. You can upload various audio assets here, and then you can just drag and drop them onto the timeline. And so I've already added something here, so we can actually go in, and I'm going to show you a couple different pretty cool things that you can do with audio, because that's definitely something that we've sort of spent a lot of time developing and we think is very important for a compelling VR experience. So this basically represents the audio that I've uploaded. And so the interesting thing is that right now I have this option enabled, which is just called point audio. And that actually enables you to spatialize any audio track that you have. So even if it's just a mono or stereo track, depending on where you put this audio track in the preview editor, we'll actually render it to sound like it's coming from that point in space. So if we wanted it to sound like this, the music is coming from, the direction that the person is speaking, you just place that audio track there. And again, similar to the hotspots, same type of functionality, you can drag and drop it, or you can control the XYZ coordinates. So if we wanted to make this sound like it's very far away in the distance, we could make that Z coordinate very large. If we wanted to sound like it was, very close, we could make that much closer. So that's an example of the point audio. We also do support a wide sort of variety of other formats, the most popular sort of being just the ambisonic, which is kind of the standard in the space for spatial audio. So if you do have ambisonic files, when you upload them, you just quickly go into here and select ambisonic B format. We also have an equal power panning option if you have 4 tracks that you want to have that equal power panning capability. And then there's just the standard audio if you just want to have the audio track sound like the, a normal piece of audio.
Like stereo.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But
Okay, this is actually pretty cool, because then you can spatialize just regular MP3s, right? You can just put them wherever you want to. So if I have a radio and I want to make it sound like it's coming from the radio, on the bottom left, I just put it there, right on top of the radio.
Yeah.
Question for you, which would make it, and I'm pretty sure the answer is no right now, but I don't know if you guys are looking at this. Because this is video, and let's say I wanted to add the audio of him talking, right, as a separate track.
Yeah.
I'll put it on him, but he moves. If we didn't use ambisonic to record, are you able to animate the audio object, or will you in the future to follow something?
Yes, that's an interesting question, because there's a lot that the runtime itself is actually capable of that we just haven't exposed yet through the composer. So it is actually possible to animate using this point-based audio system to make it, move over time throughout the scene. We just haven't added that in as sort of a easily accessible feature through the composer, just because you can imagine that, the complexity of figuring out how to make that accessible and then building the UI for that is a sort of problems that we're still figuring out how to do well. But that's definitely kind of the next iteration of the composer, which is, it's interesting that we're filming this tutorial now, because in a couple months we're actually going to be launching a whole new one. So maybe we'll get the chance to do another one of these. But the kind of composer V2 is really built and designed in a way so that we can add in these sort of cool new features, expose a lot of the functionality that's actually currently available, but just not accessible through the UI.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. And once you figure that out, then you can animate any object.
Yeah, exactly. And what's a major difference between our platform is that we actually built our runtime specifically for the sort of the use case and what we're trying to build. So we're not built off of a web framework or Unity or Unreal. We actually have our own C++ unified rendering pipeline, and we've built everything, specifically based on what we ideally want to achieve over the next couple of years. So that does give us a lot of control and flexibility over what we can do, which is what we've spent, the basically the bulk of the last 2 or 3 years of development time was really kind of essentially building our own game engine, and then this composer is just kind of the non-technical window to access it, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yep, it does.
Great. So I think that pretty much wraps up the content creation section. And the great thing about the platform is that as we're making these changes, you can easily publish content to the app to preview it. So if I wanted to see, what this early version of the content looked like, I could just go to Save and Stage, and then when I go to my EEVO application, I can immediately preview what I've built, see if I like where I place the audio or the different hotspots, and then quickly kind of make changes. You don't have to repackage an application or republish anything. Once you click Save and Stage, it'll immediately update in the application.
So question for you. So when you do the save and stage, it publishes it to your, obviously, distribution. And then I need to use the EEVO app on my Rift or Vive or Oculus Go to be able to watch this. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so I can actually walk through that. It's a pretty simple setup. So
sure.
You actually go back into the main sort of overview page. You click on the account section. And then you download the EEVO device, which you can download on iOS and Android. We're launching an Oculus Go app soon, but you can also give people access to Oculus Go via the Oculus keys, but we're working on a public distribution of that as well. So you download the EEVO app, you click on Register Device, and then in the EEVO app, if you go into the settings section, there's you can click to authenticate, and then that'll generate a PIN. You type the PIN in to this window here. And then once you do that, the EEVO app will be linked to your account. So then when you click Save and Stage, it'll show up basically in your authenticated session on the EEVO app.
And what about for people that want to see it on a Vive or a Rift? Is desktop HMDs accessible through this app or no?
It's something that's on the roadmap. Typically, our focus has been on the mobile platforms, just because we see that being the first wave of adoption, and a lot of the trickier sort of challenges that have to be solved. A lot of the bottlenecks are on the mobile side. So having solved a lot of those on the mobile side, it is relatively easy for us to publish to Rift and Vive. It hasn't been a huge priority, just because that's not necessarily the platform that customers are most interested in,
right,
with this kind of content.
Right.
Those platforms are definitely a lot better for the 6 degrees of freedom and the fully interactive experiences, where 360 video and interactive 360 video does perform really well on, especially the Oculus Go, I think is a great kind of platform for this.
Yeah, well, and then wait till Santa Cruz comes out next quarter.
Yeah. It's funny. I think every conversation I have with someone in the VR space, that's always mentioned at least once. Just wait till Santa Cruz.
Right.
Everyone's so excited for it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what about desktop experience? Meaning that if people just want to watch it on their browser, can they watch it in the browser, or this is purely for HMDs?
This is mostly focused on we distribute to native applications, and the main sort of reason for that is just ensuring sort of a high frame rate and high quality playback. We are working on distributing a browser, but we've sort of actively held off on that just because we feel the experience isn't there's a lot of limitations to the browser. So we're kind of actively working to make sure that once we distribute to the browser, it's going to be a high quality experience no matter where you watch it. Right now, if you actually try and watch a lot of those browser-based experiences in a headset, you're going to deal with very low frame rate, which is often what causes the nausea or the uncomfortable experiences. But we definitely get why people want to access some of these experiences on a desktop. But you can watch the experiences without a headset on a mobile, or iPad has also been a good sort of 2D interface to watch a lot of this stuff. But it's something that's on the roadmap.
Yep, no, makes a lot of sense. Now, can you make an experience public where you don't need to log in, or do you always have to log in to watch an experience?
So yeah, there's a couple different ways to distribute content. Typically the way, once you've created your content and you want to distribute it publicly, we would create a white label application for you. So in the case of the BBC, they use these same exact tools that you saw to create interactive experiences like Planet Earth 2 or the Lion Whisperer, which were really amazing. And then we basically provided a BBC VR white label application where when they hit publish, that's where their content would show up. And that's the typical way that most customers publish their content once they're ready for it to go public. And yeah, for the most part, we work with a lot of, larger companies, but we also do, try and support smaller creators and studios. So yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because, the BBC is one thing, but what if you're Joe Schmo real estate and obviously you want to do a tour of, let's see, homes? You don't have a generic EEVO app that people can just publish to that, or is it always a white label kind of thing?
Yeah, so yeah, in that case, we're looking into potentially adding a section to the EEVO app that's just like, creator, creator section.
Right.
We haven't figured out the best way to do that yet, as far as just like making sure that it isn't distracting to other people who just want to use the app to connect it to their account. But for the most part, it's once you authenticate the EEVO app to your account, anytime you publish new stuff, it'll show up. So you just have to connect it once. And then once you do that, you can keep publishing new content, and then you can use that to show people. But yeah, it's a little bit trickier, obviously, if you want to then share that with a big group of people, and then you have to kind of set that up for them. But we're looking into a way to add like a public section on the app itself.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So right now, if I create something and I want to publish it for my customer, let's say that I'm creating it for, you would then have to create a white label app for them to be able to access that experience, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I create multiple experiences for them, would it be a different app every single time for every experience? Or once they have that white label app, we can publish multiple experiences and their viewers can choose whichever experience they want to experience?
Yeah, so it's definitely the latter, in the sense that once you have the one white label application, every time you create and publish a new piece of content, it will instantly show up in that white label application. So you don't have to repackage applications. You don't have to release an update to the store. It's all seamlessly connected. That's really where that sort of focus on scalability comes in. Like, we want to make sure that this is actually a set of tools and software that a company can use if they're creating a piece of content a week, or if they're distributing new onboarding or new training content to thousands of employees. Obviously, having to create a new app every time isn't kind of the best solution for that. And I can show you a little bit of sort of how that works, because I realized we didn't quite look at that view yet. So if I dive into the Kaltura onboarding demo, all I have to do to publish it is click submit, then publish, and then when I click release, it'll show up in either the white label app that I've connected it to, or an authenticated EEVO app.
Right, of the customer, let's say.
Yeah. So if Kaltura had a Kaltura VR application, as soon as they hit publish, that will show up in the app, and then anyone who has the Kaltura app can immediately stream or download that experience. If they wanted to make some changes, they could quickly unpublish, go back into the composer, make some edits, then re-release it, in the span of like 15 minutes. And again, there's no updates required to the app. It'll just show up as a new piece of content in the list view of the application.
Got it. And your business model is charging for the white label, or what's your business model, without getting into the specifics of...
Yeah. So there's a basic license of the platform itself to use the content creation tools, access the EEVO app, and connect your app to your account. And then there's sort of additional licensing for the actual white label applications. We sort of have a basic white label template, which if you just want, your branding, logo, differences, different backgrounds and things like that, that's very easy to edit and change. And so that's pretty accessible. But oftentimes, because we work with large companies, there'll be a lot of customizations. They want additional features. And a big difference in the way that I guess we work with customers is that it's not like, oh, here are the tools, go figure it out yourself. A lot of times we'll actually be diving into the content that customers are creating. We'll be actually like helping them edit content, figure out how to make the experience better. Like, our number one goal is making sure that the content has an impact on the customer's business. And so that often means like we're kind of their partner throughout the whole process.
Well, very cool, Alejandro. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving us an overview of the app. If people want to learn more about EEVO, or you want to give a URL, Twitter, email, whatever you like.
Yeah, you guys can always find us at eevo.com. My personal email is just my first name, Alejandro, at eevo.com. If you have any questions, always super responsive on my email, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you have any questions, comments, ideas, projects, would be happy to hear from you and see if we could collaborate and work together on something.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Alejandro, and to the rest of you, I'm glad you were here with us. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to click on the subscribe button so that I can get more guests for this tutorial series. If you are ever in the Southern California area, we have a monthly meetup with lots of great VR, AR, and MR presentations. You can join or RSVP for our next meetup at howtocreatevr.com/meetup. Finally, if you are interested in learning more about how to create VR, AR, and MR experiences, please visit howtocreatevr.com. So until the next episode, I'm Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everyone.